Hi friends, Host Eric
But
here. Host talking to this video may or may not be published. Your Huckleberry brought up the topic of the shadow types. So C.S. Joseph is one person to popularize this notion, but I guess he got it from Linda Barons, is that correct?
I think so.
Okay. So can you basically summarize what he or she means by shadow types?
Well, he goes with the four sides of the mind thing, and the shadow would like say for an INTP would be an ENTJ, and vice versa. And that's what I want to talk about. I think that me thinking I was an INTP for so long, I was able to actually think I was that maybe because that's the shadow type I dig into, and I can relate to it
So is
in
the
a lot of
idea
cases.
of a shadow type that periodically you become that shadow type and change from your existing type into a different type for some sort of time?
Not in any official sort of way, I don't think. That's not how I would think of it.
So is it just a
It's kind of
I guess I'm
just
trying to
a
understand what's the
display.
relationship? What's the mechanics of the relationship? Like, it is. So, what's my shadow type?
It would be INTJ, I think.
Okay, so does that mean I'd be more likely to mistype myself as INTJ?
Um, well, I don't know what I necessarily think about it, but possibly, like for myself, maybe I'm more of like a shadow prone version of whatever I am.
So, I guess what I'm
That's
trying to get at though is what does it mean to be, say, in your shadow or prone to your shadow? What does that mean? Does it mean you're using different cognitive functions for some stretch of time? Your
it's
existing cognitive functions look different, or
you're
what?
selecting for your unconscious functions to get the job done
So you're
because
attending via your unconscious functions consciously or unconsciously.
probably more of a like a defense mechanism sort of thing. Is how it would come out.
Okay. So if I were under a lot of stress, I'd appear to have no regard for equity and give NITE attention to things.
For myself, I when I thought I was an INTP, I would rationalize the ENTJ moments, I call them, as my shadow coming out sometimes. Like you're coming at me with this, and INTP me doesn't know what to do with it. So get ready for big bad ENTJ me
Okay, well,
to set you straight,
that
sort of
reasoning
deal.
right there is a clear indication that you were not then an INTP and that you are in fact an ENTJ because that's not T. That doesn't validate on TI grounds. You have to ignore TI entirely to think that's meaningful. In other words, you've got to ask the question: is this claim about shadow types a claim that a person uses different conscious attentional manners for a stretch of time in response to a given thing? And the answer apparently is yes. But the problem is, personality is defined as that which remains the same throughout one's life. And it might manifest in variation somewhat, but certainly you're not going to switch functions. I'm never going to be an NIDOM, no matter how much pressure I'm under. I'm never going to attend as an NIDOM does. I'd have to be an entirely different human being. Who I am, my nature, my personality, my being, is defined by my cognitive function stack. It makes me be a person who takes action on an external metaphysical field as a foremost course of action. And if I am in a traumatic state, I'll retreat to my fourth slot function. And I'll think, okay, I need to bolster my SI. This is how everybody deals with traumatic response is they go to their fourth slot. When my dog died, for example, I retreated and cleaned my house and nested and made everything comfortable as possible for me for a solid week of mourning and crying and stuff. I was doing SI shit, SI home maintenance stuff. And the reason is because that's the kind of differentiation in self that does actually occur in the face of trauma is a counter a brief countervaluing of your dominant and valuing of your fourth. And the reason for that is because your fourth is a relief function from your dominant, and the fourth is one you're trying to get away from most of the time when you're focusing on your dominant. So if something catastrophic happens, you think, okay, I've been ignoring this too long. I've got to address this. You just don't even think it; it just happens, and you get in your fourth, in the grip of your fourth, as people say, which is not necessarily a bad thing at all. It's a proper way to self-soothe. But regardless, certainly you're still using the same conscious function stack. Your fourth is still in the fourth slot. It is sort of acting like a dominant function for a stretch of time because the pain that you're in is preventing you from functioning in your default state and requiring you to seek relief. Pain forces you to seek relief. Your fourth slot function is your relief function. There's a good mechanical explanation for it. There's no such explanation for a switch front and back stack functions. And if you think you could make meaning out of it without having parsed that part out yet, then you are clearly ignoring TI. Because no INTP would ever have bought into this idea in the first place without having it clearly defined adequately. And nobody's adequately defined it because the people who are using this function idea don't distinguish between pieces of analysis, objects of analysis, meta-analysis, and or process analysis. So it's like they're not actually analyzing a process, but they don't realize that they're talking about a correlate or a process. They don't know in what frame that's accomplished. They don't have. It's not part of a model. It's just a little bit of like, look, I can knit too, and they knit this little stretch of fabric that's not anything, right? And you go, well, but look, you can see here the pattern's blue and white. And you go, but that's not even a thing.
I agree mostly. I bought into the shadow part of it. Kind of like tentatively. I didn't think of it as you're switching to anything. It's more of a you're displaying these because these aren't what you are choosing to use to tackle this because they're not. They might not be as easy.
But
It's
only half of attention is displayed, right? Only your extroverted functions are displayed. You can render introverted things external via extroverted functions, but half of you, at least, or approximately, is hidden, not displayed. So your attention, not every manner in which you pay attention is visible to the external parties.
mm-hmm.
So it wouldn't make sense then to say that you're in your shadow because it means you're displaying more like your shadow type. Especially if your shadow type's an introvert.
Yeah, when you're by yourself.
So I display more by my shadow type when I'm by myself. But there's nobody to see
Maybe.
the display then. It's not a display.
Well, it's you. It'd have to be you. What do you feel more like the description maybe of this type?
Do I feel more like a description? See, if it's not a display, the problem
So
here, it doesn't
the
matter
way
what it is. The problem is you haven't thought about specifically what it is, and that's an indication of TI ignoring. You wouldn't have given the notion very much credence if you had thought about, okay, well, these are what it needs to establish in order to have credence, which is typically what a TI DOM would have done with it. I think most ISTPs would dismiss those notions in short order because simply not because they're bad or wrong, but because they fail to say what they are or establish their own scope at all.
right, I think what drew me into it because I don't think I'm an INTP. I think what drew me into it was like, oh, that's relatable, really relatable. I don't know exactly like how to flesh it out and make it make sense to why it's so relatable, but I'm gonna keep that in mind for now and see if the rest of it gets filled out.
Hmm.
That's what conversations like this are for, kind of.
Sure. Yeah. I guess I was still confirming ENTJ. Um. So how did you come about to eventually type yourself correctly? Because you knew coming in you were an ENTJ.
Honestly, Discord. I started talking to a lot of other people in the typing communities through Love Who and their Discord, and just started noticing. I've actually typed an ENTJ on like my first day in that Discord. I'm like, he was confused, and I'm like, I think you're an ENTJ. This is an ENTJ. This is how an ENTJ acts. And then I was like, we're a lot alike. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
um, and just kind of got the ball rolling, and eventually, uh, after incidences like that, I had to really take a hard look at am I an ENTJ? Because like I said, I'd always written it off because they're so ambitious, and I'm not.
I mean, the thing is, you certainly seem goal oriented. Whether you're ambitious or not is a different question
Exactly.
to be
Yeah, I
asked.
think that's what I realized. I think.
Yeah. So, what what areas of typology annoy you the most? You said you've had some rants in the past about it. Or what things do you dislike about cognitive functions typology, or, for example, anything specific I say would be fine too if you want to critique that.
Um, the easiest way to set me off is to talk about OP or CS Joseph. Honestly, um, I think that it's not because like Dave Superpowers. I'm not a fan, and I think it's just a huge money making scheme, really. Um, maybe they have fun doing it and they're actually interested in it, but in the end, I think that they've definitely realized that they're building a skyscraper on very shaky foundation, and they keep building it upward, and it pisses me off the higher it gets, you know.
Okay.
And I have to deal with all their people on forums and whatnot coming in and pretty much it's like they're Enneagram people coming and trying to argue cognitive functions. It might as well be, and it's just I don't have time for it, and it pisses me off, and I can go on forever about it. But
Well, that's just because
uh,
you're subtype 342.
exactly, it almost completely made me just I'm like, oh, typology is bullshit. Cool, I'll just move on.
That's the risk of misinformation or having people making the wrong arguments on your side of things. I always hate that when somebody's agreeing with me but making the wrong arguments and just don't talk. I don't want those arguments made. Those aren't going to win the point. But
Right.
shit happens and we have to put up with it. I guess. Those people are
That's relatable,
arguing.
actually.
Those people are arguing in favor of typology, but they don't even know what the fuck they're talking about. The thing they're calling
Yeah,
typology isn't even typology.
yeah, they're the problem. They're the ones that are making other people say, "Oh, it's bullshit." Obviously,
I mean, I think you're
they don't
correct in saying Dave
understand.
Superpowers is the problem. Let's lay the blame where it belongs. He's the one
Right.
perpetrating this nonsense. Other people believing it, that is to be an inevitable reality given the display of different types. There are some types that are inherently more susceptible to that kind of nonsense, authoritative nonsense.
They want their thoughts to be put into their head instead of generating them themselves.
Uh,
I feel
yeah, I mean they prefer
like,
to
here, I'm the authority.
delegate
Here's what you think. That's
right
how you do it.
to delegate the issue of deliberation to the expert. That's if you
Right.
got deliberation in the fourth slot, maybe in the seventh slot. Probably not in the seventh because you got it as a tool function too. Probably if you got deliberation in the fourth slot, you're likely to do that. If you've got TI or FI fourth, well, maybe not. Maybe it's just if you are um, TE seeking. If you got TE fourth, then you're gonna want people to give you instructions. INFPs and ISFPs probably.
That's where my thinking goes to. Pretty much just really low T in general. I think they're like, you do it. You do it for me. Tell me what you got.
Well, like
I'm like that with feelings.
one example of
Yeah.
TI TE conflict. I dealt with this lady one time at a coffee shop, and she was TI fourth, and she was supposed to add 10% to my bill. My bill was like $6 or something. It was $6 after the 10%. It was like 5.10, 5.40. Add 54 cents. It was like $6, right?
Hmm.
But she kept adding 5.40 plus 5.40 plus 54 cents, and trying to give me um, this bill of like $12 or whatever. And I kept trying to explain
Most
to her,
inefficient
no,
way ever.
here's how you do it. And but what she kept insisting was, no, here's the way I've been trained. Now I'm pretty sure, as a consequence, this girl was an FE dom. She was
ESFJ.
seeking TI, but couldn't trust me to provide it. Didn't want to have to do the think along process with me. Is afraid of being fooled in some sense by my TI, even though she's TI front stack. But TE is actually rather strong in the eighth slot function. Comes forward and says, "Do it the TE way. Do the way you've been trained. As long as you take the steps you've been told to take, you can't go wrong here." And when she kept getting the same answer, eventually she called her supervisor in the middle of the night, woke her supervisor up, and her supervisor told her it was in fact what I had said the whole time. But that's an
Like, oh yeah, I've
example
got a little bit of TI.
of TI fourth resulting in TE eighth that looks also like TE fourth. TE fourth and TE eighth are gonna both probably seek instruction like that, seek a clear path from somebody else.
I'm the same way with feelings for the most part. I think it's like you tell me how I should feel about this because I don't know.
It's kind of like eighth slot as well, I think. So it's interesting to see fourth and eighth generally look similar. What else? What are some of your other problems with typology, or what are your thoughts about it?
Um, well, my tendency would be to go over to CSJ now and talk about what I don't like about him, but because I think he has a lot more interesting thoughts to put forth. Really, it's just that the zoomed out package of what he has is a piece of trash in my opinion. It's purely a business as well, and he's just got a more neatly put together, structured system that he presents in a really nice way when you're trying to learn what it is. And I
Yeah,
think he draws a lot of people in with that. But I think he's an ESTJ, and he'll throw out like um, little stories like this one time this guy I knew was doing this and this is what that means and then he'll be like, wow, did you see that any rant I just did? And I'm like, wow, I'm such an ENTP, how can anyone say I'm not an ENTP? And it's like that was just a story from your fucking memory, man. Like
there's some third slot enemy right there.
I agree.
It's like my
He's
dad.
like really proud of it, and even though it was almost nothing.
My dad loves to be the one talking, and everybody else's job is to listen at all times. But he mostly tells stories from the past, or references things, or talks about things he saw in the news, or whatever. Let me get my refill my cup of coffee here.
Okay.
So you and I have disagreed a lot in the past, mostly about politics. But where do you still disagree with me about cognitive functions?
That'd be a harder, like, actually that's what keeps me watching your channel is I feel like you've got that figured out pretty well as far as I can, like, I can't, it's hard for me to find a crack to pick on. Um, that's why I generally, like, you and like some kind of love who flavor, a little bit of Michael Pierce is my understanding, which I know that doesn't say much, but um,
No, I think those are all good people. They're not as wrong as other people in general. And I don't really watch much Love Who, but I know he's a TI Dom, so.
it's in question right now.
Oh, is
Yeah,
it? What does he think he
yeah.
is?
You might be in the same pickle that I was in.
Well, I never really formally tested him. I interfaced with him some, and I
I've never
typically
heard him claim a type. He's very
I
careful
typed him
about
as
that.
INTP, but I never did a formal test typing of him. It was just from interacting with him.
Okay. Yeah, so yeah, that's he's supposed to get typed in socionics soon. Um, we'll see what happens with that, I guess.
Yeah. Um, what are your other thoughts about typological community? Do you think it's a healthy community? Do you think it's a toxic community? Do you think it's predominated by misinformation or
That's a tough one, really. I think it's all of that. um, I think that it's really healthy for certain people, and it's really toxic for others. And
when it manifests
that could be
toxically?
the
How does it
same in
manifest?
each person. I'm sorry.
When it manifests toxically, how do you think it manifests?
I think people, especially when they're mistyped, they'll identify with their type and then limit themselves to what their type does, and that's unhealthy.
Do you think people really do that though?
I'm sure they do, honestly.
Like, I've never heard somebody be like, "Well, I really want to do meow, but I guess I can't because I'm a meow." Have you?
Well, I mean, personally, I've used my INTP typing to uh, tell myself it's okay that I'm not more of a go-getter.
Do
Oh my
you
God, it's
still
just the way I am.
do you still tell yourself you're not more of a go getter, or do you still tell yourself it's okay that you're not more of a go getter? Or
Um,
another way of phrasing it is, are you now more of a go getter?
my attitude about it has changed a little bit, maybe. Not necessarily the application of who I am or anything.
Okay. And what do you think comprises the normative path for you? Like, what do you think if you were to be your most good manifestation of self? How would that? Like, if you were most satisfied by yourself, I guess. What would it look like? What would you be doing? How would you be doing differently than you are now?
I'm not sure I'd be actually living much differently than I do now. I think that maybe I'd have greater influence in certain groups, and um, I feel like I'm more of a like, here's what I know. Can like you go uh, be my agent and getting my goal done, sort of thing. Um, I like when people come to me for guidance
I see.
instead of like expecting me to take action on it.
But what if one were to say, well, the way to accomplish that is to, uh, put yourself out there in some sort of social media forum as somebody who knows things.
Right. I think a big weakness of mine has been my distaste for most people. I I'm really quick to be like, oh, you're stupid. You're useless to me, and just kind of sit in my castle all the time, you know. And that's been a big weakness of mine that I'm trying to get away from.
Well, that sounds like
It's painful.
an effort at self betterment that's worth undertaking. To me, I mean, I don't know what my
I
opinion
agree.
is,
Yeah.
but it's easy for us all to get frustrated with the failures of communication. It's hard to get people to see eye to eye, uh, even when we're very convinced that it should be obvious to the other person. The extent to which it's difficult to accomplish that is somewhat linked to the way that people are attached to certain uh, beliefs rather than to having the right arguments. But that's reality and that's human nature. It's not to say that my approach to it is better. It's just that that is a factor that limits the ability of people to communicate with each other because they think their positions are part of who they are.
I agree. Especially, well, I won't say that. Certain people, everything I say Like I do my best to frame things in a way when I'm saying it to is like I'm not talking about you. I'm just talking about the general person that you remind me of. You know? And I
Mm-hmm.
expect that to not be taken personally, which doesn't always work.
Mm-hmm. Do people ever say that you should be more positive in your thinking?
Yes,
And what do you
I'm
say in
I'm
response to that?
extremely negative. Uh, I say I'm naturally this way and I'm comfortable being this way. And the only thing that makes me uncomfortable with it is people telling me that it's not right.
Okay,
So
sure. Um, do you think that people's desire for positivity as a default is indicative of their desire to avoid looking at hard truths that they need to look at?
I think that a lot of people I come in contact with have this certain need for comfort that I don't have. I don't seem to have much of it all. And
And what do you think
I'll
they're comforted by?
trample on their feelings a lot.
So, what is it? Give me an example of something that somebody might be comforted by that you might trample other feelings over.
Well, the most obvious one that comes to mind is like religion, for instance,
Okay. Do you find
and
a
all the
lot of
comforts it
people?
provides.
You find a lot of people get offended by your negation of religion?
I feel that it's more like I'll hear someone's problems and then I'll hear uh, them say, I'll hear someone's problems and I'll see where if they were able to face hard truths, they would actually be able to help themselves or at least start to help themselves. But instead, they'll just revert back to their comforting feelings about what they believe that isn't necessarily true. And that makes me sad.
So, you think that their relationship with uh, a magical thinking frame such as deism prevents them from solving their problems?
In a lot of cases, yeah.
And what's the mechanism by which, like, can you give me a little bit more concrete of an example, like what that would look like? Like somebody, for example, doesn't get
Um,
their car fixed because they think God will provide, or what?
right. It's like kind of the whole thing that goes into this thoughts and prayers mentality, I think, where it's like I'm doing something because I'm giving you my thoughts and prayers on Facebook. Um, when in my view, that's worse than worthless.
Well, I mean,
That gives you the feeling of doing something without doing anything.
do you think they actually feel like they're doing something?
I think some of them do, yeah.
I mean, I don't think in general they feel as though they're actually solving any problem. Do you?
I think they get like a dopamine rush or whatever it is from the act of posting that.
I mean, it's just sort of the default social moray thing to say, though, in certain circumstances. Like, if your town got hit by a hurricane, I mean, I don't typically say you'll be in my thoughts and prayers. Maybe you're in my thoughts, I might say, but I'd be more likely to say, well, I hope everything's okay, or something like, I wish you all the best in this time of in this time of trouble, or some other
Yeah,
effy
I'm more like a
bullshit.
oof, that sucks kind of
I
person.
mean, none of those things are meaningful at all. I wouldn't say the prayer one is any less meaningful or more harmful than any of the others. It's just a gesture um, of caring rather than actual caring necessarily.
Right, but on a social media platform, you wouldn't feel any pressure to say anything at all. That's them going to that page and saying, "Oh, I'm saying something too."
Right, well, you don't have to feel pressure to say something to want to say something. If you're an
Like if
FE,
someone
if you're an
sneezes,
FE
right?
valuing type, you enjoy that kind of interface. You're an FE counter valuing type because it's eighth slot for you. Eighth slot is also counter valued as a sixth slot, but eighth slot is it's a more mixed relationship you have with it. Consciously, it's counter valued. Unconsciously, it's valued. But regardless, uh, a lot of people feel satisfaction just for the engagement with other people and knowing that they've chimed in their warmth to the equation. That the other person might find that soothing or helpful or something.
I think that on social media, a lot of times that's worthless, and that they're getting the feeling of worth from it. And I think that's unhealthy as a species for us to be that way.
Well, do you think a YouTube comment is this positive about my stuff to me is worthless?
Not if you're going to read it and draw meaning from it. I think a YouTube comment usually includes something that you actually like about the content, and it's
Okay,
a
so only
critique in some way.
so if one of if those cumulative well wishes genuinely made the person feel good because maybe they're an ESFJ themselves or something, would that justify my behavior?
If you're aiming it at a content creator and they're getting it and you're like, oh, that's positive feedback, I'm doing well, then that's helpful. But if they're aiming it like, oh, a hurricane hit North Carolina last night, and you're just on there like thoughts and prayers to North Carolina, what is that doing? You know?
Okay. Um, what if is it worse than hope you didn't die?
No, that's funnier.
Glad you didn't die. Talk to you soon.
Yeah, like so if someone sneezes, for instance, I feel no like I'll make a point to not say anything. I'm just like, oh, you sneezed, so what? You know? I'm not gonna say bless you, God bless you.
I,
Like what? What is that?
I typically say, "May God bless you upon these magnificent sneezes of yours."
Yeah, more likely to say like, oh, pull yourself together, man. You know,
I
just
I,
joking,
I
but
actually
yeah,
say big sneezes for little whoever. So if you were to have a sneezing friend, I'd say, "Big sneezes for little Huckleberry."
yeah. See, that's something of worth because at least it's funny. Yeah,
Another acceptable thing is you sneezed.
as an observation, not necessarily needed,
Or
but
how about excuse you?
well, if they've sneezed right in your face, sure.
I see. Just as long as they don't get any blessings from you, that's the important thing. Would you ever say to
No
somebody, "The devil
disingenuous
curse you"?
blessings.
The devil curse you for your sneezes?
No,
You're
devil.
not in favor of the devil cursing people either?
No, I actually heard a guy talking about how uh, he's epileptic and there's a demon in his brain causing his epilepsy the other day. So that's
Hmm.
still a thing in some people.
Maybe that belief is caused by his epilepsy. You know that epileptic people lose a lot of. It's not good for your brain to have epileptic seizures.
He has a whole backstory that's quite interesting. He'd be a good guest to have, really.
Mm. Well,
I usually don't hear someone's childhood backstory and actually feel bad for them.
I'm
But
gonna
in
go
his
ahead and
case,
agree with you. Epilepsy is not caused by demons.
no. See, and that's the sort of thinking we need to get beyond as a whole, not just as individuals.
I mean, as a whole, we have gotten beyond that. We don't treat epilepsy as a subset of demonology.
I agree, but there are other things that have taken its place.
I mean, there are always going to be fools who buy into foolishness. The problem is when the foolishness becomes public policy, like this COVID policy and stuff, you know. And
There's a lot of Trojan horses I see.
well, the reason the COVID policy is so absurd, of course, is because we already know how to deal with this thing. You let individuals choose their own course of action. You keep them informed. If you think you're a high risk and you really want to avoid getting it, then you stay at home or triple up your mask or wear a respirator or whatever. And if I don't feel like it, I don't feel like it. We leave it upon everybody's good will to say if you're obviously sick and contagious, stay home. If you have no idea and you're carrying it and you might be contagious, obviously that's just how the fucking cookie crumbles. People who want to take the extra measures to avoid it, it's on them to do so. That's a rights-based approach. And then we wouldn't have this clusterfuck of a disaster.
The other thing, there's a lot of incompetence that goes into this clusterfuck. Um, not
you
knowing
can't
how to
competently
control the public
execute
properly is one of them.
you can't properly execute a bad policy though. You can't competently execute a bad policy. You can make it slightly less damaging or more damaging depending on how badly you fuck it up. But the problem isn't your execution of a bad policy; it's the bad policy.
Sure, assuming that it's a bad policy.
Well, I mean that's the thing. It violates what we understand as the proper way to structure society. If, for example, you have peanut allergies, it's on you to avoid eating peanuts. It's not on every store to avoid serving peanuts.
Right.
And that
But
same
if
basic
peanut
principle.
allergies are contagious, it's up to you to not spread your
Okay,
peanut
so
allergy to others.
like we have with the flu, right? So 5 years before COVID, in the same months that Italy was being struck by the most severe instance of COVID in the world, still, um, and the most severely impacted population in the world. 5 years before, they had lost an identical or approximately identical number of people to a regular flu. So we have to keep proportionality in mind. Do we respond to things proportional to equivalence or not? What are the differences between COVID and regular flu? Well, more contagious, no immunity in the system, in the population. But we have to remember what that means. It means our likelihood of succeeding in any quarantine efforts is very low. And as has proven to be the case, as I said when this thing first started, as I predicted then, as I indicated then, what the proper policy was, and as I indicated then, how this wouldn't work and why it wouldn't work and why it was a terrible fucking idea, I've been proved right every single step of the way. Because the proper thing to do is to let it run its course and keep people informed about how they can protect themselves if they want to.
I would say that that's right, as long as the goal is to get people to take it seriously and protect themselves.
I mean, I think that should be a goal, but I think the remembrance of the centralized authority executing policies on behalf of everybody without any legal justification, forcing millions of businesses to shut down for months at a time on the grounds that their action was going to be efficacious, again, ends justifying the means. And again, what happened? Clusterfuck of a disaster, as it always occurs when we justify the means with the ends.
Clusterfuck is right, and it's it's hard to sort out what actually went wrong to me
Okay,
exactly.
well, the first thing that went wrong is people didn't listen to Eric because Eric articulated all this way at the beginning when everyone was hugely enthusiastic about all this nonsense. So one lesson from this is vote for Eric for president because he has foresight and wisdom, unlike everybody else who talked about this when it first started happening. That's one conclusion to draw from this.
So the people who like anti-maskers, the people who refuse to wear a mask in public, you're for them? Like you think that they're justified?
I mean, I generally wear a mask only in places where I absolutely have to, such as going into a store. I won't wear it otherwise if I can get
Where
away
it's
with not wearing it.
appropriate to be
Well,
a
I mean,
considerate person?
I would have agreed that wearing a mask would be plenty to ask of me, except everybody in favor of masks already decided to force everybody to do it. So unfortunately,
That's the
I
problem.
don't respond well to being forced to do things at gunpoint. And that's
Right.
another thing that these COVID fucks didn't take into consideration. People don't appreciate that. I don't acknowledge your claim to my face.
Right. That's that's what I'm hearing a lot of. It's a lot of you can't tell me what to do, even if that just happens to be probably what I should do.
The point is, again, it's simpler than that. It's people who say I should have to wear a mask are trying to tell me what I have to do with my face. Not just me, everybody. Even though there's no definitive justification for it, even if you were to justify the means with the ends, they have not established their case adequately. They've not calculated all the ends. They've only calculated half of the ends, the presumed benefits of this quarantine, and not actually measured the massive myriad unintended harms that correspond to the course of action. So they're not justified to make any policy prescriptions.
I think in the beginning of this, there was a lot of things in the air, and it seemed like there were two sides to it. Like there was a side that I guess you could call them more alarmist, where they're like, "Oh, this is the big one. We need to prepare and do everything we can." And then there was the anti-alarmist, which was just like, "It's nothing. Let's just keep the economy going, and that's all that matters." And one of those happened to be president at the time, and got out to a lot of people that this is all bullshit and a scheme
Right.
to
And so
fuck up our economy.
here's what I want to stress. This is a perfect example of why you don't want the wrong people on your side. Trump was right about COVID, but he made all the wrong arguments. And so, as a consequence, of course, he's got the bully pulpit. Of course, the truth and wisdom and sense and justice and righteousness and correctness fell. Why? Because he had the correct position, but the wrong justification. Justifications matter.
Right.
And so, what I'm saying is, everybody should have listened to me. I had the right justifications. No intelligent human being was saying the reason we should do this is because of economic harms and benefits. What every sane human being was thinking is the reason we should not do this is it's unprecedented, illegal, it imposes on everybody based on an appeal to ignorance. There's insufficient information that's being used as a justification for compelling this course of action forward. There's been no acknowledgement of a law of unintended consequences. There's been no impact calculus in terms of magnitude, in terms of probability, in terms of time frame. There's been no calculation of ancillary benefits in the same area, such as other deaths that are caused by this thing. There's been none of the work done to make this policy advocacy. Why should we ever possibly go forward with something that hasn't justified itself adequately? And that's the core thing, is remember, the pro-COVID people were making an advocacy we take action. And we should never, ever, ever take action in ignorance, as what has happened. Because we didn't ask for the right kind of justifications, because we allowed the wrong kind of justifications, because we didn't acknowledge that this clusterfuck of a wrong justification is resultant in every horror that's ever happened in the history of humankind, we embraced our own suicide.
Huh. Economically?
As a species, remember, you're not talking about economics, you're talking about a person's life where they built up their business over years. It's their livelihood, it's their family's livelihood. It's not just their physical well being, it's their ontological well being. If your logic stood, we should lock everybody in a cage to keep them safe until they live out their natural life. We don't do that for a good reason, because we prioritize principle and your ability as an individual to choose your own course of action over your ability as an individual to force your perspective on everybody else.
Hmm. Let's see.
That's why we need me to save the country from wrong ideas. In part, in one part of a large number of reasons. I won't permit bullshit to get past me. I promise you that. You'll get a full accounting of when I am not being principled. I'll say, look, in this instance, we got a coral reef situation. It was unprincipled to build this thing, but what's growing on top of it is it contains too much life and well-being for us to remove the entire structure. So we've got to be sensible about it. That's an ends justifying means argument. You could reasonably point that out. Except it's not an argument to take action, it's an argument to not take action, which is a substantially different kind of argument, and we can evaluate substantially differently. Because, remember, it's the taking of action that is responsible for most of the problems, not the failure to take action.
I think that this clusterfuck has been the product mainly of a system of governance that is obsolete, or is becoming obsolete and like rapidly.
But I mean, that's the
And it's
thing.
kind of a hard look at what
This is
needs to
not
be
the fault
fixed.
of the federal government. The federal government didn't do this. State governors did this.
I'm not talking about any of those specifically. I'm talking about the entire structure of it, zoomed all the way out, is
How can you blame
kind of.
government for something that world health officials forced to happen?
I'm not saying just government. I'm saying the way we conduct ourselves in civilization is it needs to change along with the technology we have.
Discourse needs to change. The way we talk about things, the justifications we demand. If we allow people to get away with justifying their means by their ends, we will always have disasters. Now, if it is necessary to make such justification, we need to acknowledge it as substandard. We need to come up with some way in which we don't have to justify bullshit with bullshit. We can do better than that. In other words, you can get your outcome in ways that are justified, or you can get your outcome in ways that aren't. If you're not creative enough to come up with ways that are justified, then we don't take your action. It's that simple.
So I kind of look at it like, are you familiar with the show Supernatural at all, or any
Mm,
show at all that's gone on for way too long?
yeah, I
It
can think of
starts
a
off
couple of those.
it starts off like, oh, this is interesting, cool, and they can do all these little things, and you're like, oh, there's angels now, crazy. And then it gets to a point where every single new character, every single problem is epic. Like it's just this person could take out everything, right? And it's who gives a shit at this point, right?
Right.
I feel like that's where we're at as a civilization.
Right. Well, and you and I are in agreement there that we need a serious change of tone and change of style of communication because people aren't meaningfully usually talking about ideas the way that we are here tonight.
Right.
When they're talking about COVID, they're being partisan. They're saying it's it's this way because only those damn conservatives or or over the only
Right.
those damn liberals or whatever. We're talking about it as a substantive issue. We're saying, okay, this hasn't worked, and why hasn't it worked? We pulled back the frame far enough to agree that it's fundamentally a problem of how we communicate with each other. I would hope, because if we don't
Everyone's
communicate,
radicalized.
yeah, I mean, there's no discursive bridge building because that's what I'm for, and it's my destiny. I've got it. I've got it manifested, but
It's my
it's going to
team.
require a lot of it's going to require a lot of legwork.
It's your destiny, huh?
Yeah, it is my destiny. I've been
Do
spending
you
all
believe
this
in
time.
destiny?
Yeah, I choose to.
So it's kind of like Jordan Peterson with his belief in God. He's like, I act as though God exists.
Well, when I say I choose to believe in destiny, what I mean is, um, I guess I I will choose to affirm it. I don't, for example, affirm the belief in God. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't agree with the statement that God exists, but I understand faith as not an advocacy issue, but rather a behavioral issue. And so I don't behave as though I do believe in God. I engage with God and understand it to be not a matter of advocacy, not a matter about which one affirms or negates, because it is fundamentally a magical thinking frame. So I've got it more properly positioned than Jordan Peterson has it.
Hmm. Okay. What type do you think he is?
I think he's your type,
I think so too. Like you can
ENTJ.
see his rage. He's got all the. You can tell there's all this rage behind his eyes that he's just holding back all the time.
I kind of agree with you, and I've long been mad at him because, of course, him and Sam Harris and all those other people, they're avoiding me. They don't know they're avoiding me because they never heard of me or have any idea I exist. But as far as I'm concerned, they keep avoiding me. If they were serious, they'd find me and they'd realize they need to test themselves against me.
You need
You
to
know?
make bigger splashes, I think.
Well,
Get on Discord. Maybe that's a start.
yeah. You and I have a similar sense of fundamental dissatisfaction with the way the world operates in some way. I'm mostly a positive guy. You might be mostly more negative, and nothing wrong with that. Um, but I share with you a sense that something's not working properly because bad ideas are winning in the marketplace of ideas, and that means there's something sick, something not structurally right about the marketplace of ideas, because it should affirm the best ideas and reject the worst ideas and be less certain about things in between.
I think I've pinpointed that in my mind to kind of capitalism, where it's ideas are being generated for the goal of profit instead
Okay,
of for
now
the love of generating ideas.
I'm going to agree with you here halfway. It is true that the media follows market demand. So the reason we get so many stories about meow is because that's what people are reading.
Right.
It's also true, however, that there are plenty of news sources that don't produce that kind of media, and people have the ability to choose those news sources if they want to. So it's kind of pointless complaining about market demand because market demand is what market demand is. The reality, though, however, also is that with a sufficiently bully pulpit, you can drive the nature of the narration, as Trump has. He's completely driven all discourse. Now, most of it's negative, but it doesn't matter. He's driving that bus. So where this discourse is going, he's setting the topics.
I think he's the worst person that I can think of to do that for us. But
Yeah, he's absolutely terrible because
um,
he's TI
yeah,
polar and he doesn't have much for.
you think he's the SFP?
Yeah, he's ESFP for sure.
Huh? I was thinking ESTP.
I thought that at first, just because I thought his FE looked like third slot rather than sixth slot, but he's
Hmm.
clearly got no TI at all. He doesn't justify anything with any kind of consistent reasoning. He applies bits of reasoning when it suits him, even if the obvious contradiction of something else he just did 5 seconds ago would hit anybody else in the face. It doesn't hit him in the face, you know. So
Yeah, I agree.
he's got
I don't know.
four.
It seems more of like a ESTP. I guess energy he brings. It's more of a alpha instead of a
ESFPs are like that too, actually.
you know
It's a mistake to think of ESFPs as somehow more feely or nice than ESTPs. They're not. They're quite provocative.
they're just less logical.
Yeah, they're just less logical. Um, with ESFPs, you got the worst of both worlds. You got your fourth slot NI, which means their intuition is really weak. You got your eighth slot NE, which means it's fairly strongish but countervalued and only used when serving their SE. And then you got the polar TI. So they're just this disaster of following through on their bad ideas that they're attached to regardless of reality.
Hmm.
Now, some of their ideas might be good too, but you're going to get it. You're like, not everything that Trump has done is bad. But
I'm a I'm a big believer in lanes for cognitive functions. Like an ESFP would be really great at coming up with a creative idea for how to do this painting, or they know exactly what their favorite color is when you ask them, and that's like
unfortunately,
FI lane, and then TI lane is over here doing something completely different. And I think FI likes to get into all the lanes.
yeah, it sure does. You are absolutely right about that. It does like to swerve. It's
It thinks it belongs everywhere.
FI is the external world's drunken driver.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree. That's why I push mine down and tell it to shut the fuck up.
You just stomp on those feelings until
Uh,
you just
I just let
roll
it
up into a
control
little
me from
ball
the
of
inside.
rage and
Me,
press it
like
all the way down.
unknowing to me, like it's controlling me, but I'm pretending like it's not.
Well, you definitely seem like an Enneagram style, an Enneagram type 8. Do you think anything about Enneagram?
Yeah, I think I identify as a 548.
548. Okay, yeah, so 18 tribe type. I identify as 748, 784. So we have two of the same things. Um, 548, interesting tri type for an ENTJ, and probably explains the extent to which you deviate from the type descriptions. Four
It's
is
probably where the INTP comes from, right?
Yeah, five is gonna make you seem more introverted than you are, and four is gonna make you seem less goal oriented than you are, and eight is gonna
Hmm.
make you be more like an INTJ, which is to say, except you're willing to show it. INTJ's motto is everyone's doing everything wrong, and though I am deeply enraged about it, I will show nothing. Yours is everyone is doing everything wrong, and I am deeply enraged about it, and will periodically freak out.
Right, that's pretty much it. um, yeah, a lot of the point, like the um, stereotypical signs pointed to INTJ for me. I believe it's just that I don't know. For some reason, I just it's like I just know that that's not what I am.
You're
It
clearly
doesn't make sense.
not FE Bowler. You're FE8. You got that assholey FE8 thing going on.
Yeah, I'm like, there's FE. Let me kick it. Yeah. Instead of where is it? I don't know. What is that?
Any other thoughts you'd like to discuss here on Talking with Famous People, the internet's greatest television program?
um, Not at the moment. I probably actually need to start getting ready to go to work.
All right, then. Thanks. I'll share this video with you as well. And you at home, I think we'll probably, hopefully, get Huckleberry to be down to publish this one. I think it was pretty interesting little chat here. Ran about an hour. I'll share it
Hopefully,
with
I
you
don't look
first,
like
though.
a
Okay?
sociopath.
So, thanks at home. See you later.